Welcome to the 13th video in the Secrets to Drawing video course brought to you by thevirtualinstructor.com. In this video, we're going to take a look at composition. In drawing, composition refers to the way the elements of an image are arranged within the picture plane. Much like a musical composer composes a piece of music, an artist composes an image. The elements that I'm speaking of refer to recognizable subjects, but also to the elements and principles of art, including line, space, value, color, shape, and form, as well as balance, proportion, movement, and contrast. The elements of composition that we'll discuss in this video include the importance of sketching thumbnails and preliminary work before you go on to your final piece. Compositional theories such as Plato's rule, the golden mean, the rule of thirds, and creating eye movement in artworks. We'll also discuss positive and negative space and its relevance to composition. And we'll also take a look at a few ways that you can create focal points in your artwork. But let's begin with thumbnail sketching. Thumbnails are basically small preliminary drawings. They're done to help the artist plan the final image. It's important to plan the final image because during the course of creating thumbnails, you're working out a lot of the compositional elements that are going to go in your final piece. You may be considering some of the compositional theories that we'll discuss later in this video. So always create thumbnails before you go on to your finished piece. The first compositional theory we'll discuss is positive and negative space. Positive space refers to the areas of interest within the picture plane of a drawing. Negative space refers to the areas around the areas of interest in a drawing. It's important to understand that positive and negative space work together to affect the overall composition. Positive doesn't mean good, and negative doesn't mean bad. Let's take a look at this image. Perhaps you've seen it before. If you're seeing the white area in the middle as a vase, then you're seeing the white area as the positive space, the areas of interest, and the black areas around it become the negative space. See how they work together to compose the image of a vase? However, if you're seeing faces, the opposite is true. The black areas are the positive space, and the white area in between is the negative space. If we reverse it, the opposite is true. If you're seeing a black vase, then you're seeing the black areas as the positive space, and the white areas as the negative space. Positive and negative space, remember, work together to affect the overall composition. And while there's no rule to how much positive and negative space that you should use in an image, you should always consider it. Here is an example of an equal balance of positive and negative space and how it affects the composition. Here's what that same subject matter might look like if we used mostly positive space. In this case, the dark areas, of course, are the positive space. The white areas around it are the negative space. Here's another way that you could use positive and negative space. In this case, the image is mostly negative space, again with the same subject matter. Notice how it affects the composition. The next compositional theory we'll take a look at is Plato's rule. Plato said that in order to find a good composition, you have to find variety within unity. Now, if you know anything about the principles of art, you know that variety and unity are different from each other. Variety deals with contrast and difference, while unity deals with similarities. So Plato suggested you need to find similarities within contrast. Let's take these three objects for example. In this composition of a still life drawing, we can see that they have a variety of different sizes, but in this case they're positioned all close together. So definitely there's unity, but there's no variety. In this case, we have excessive unity. In fact, if a box is placed over the space that these objects occupy in the picture plane, we can clearly see this. If we take those objects and spread them out from one another, we see that now we definitely have variety. We have a little bit more interest to the image, but the image seems subsected. It's not harmonious and it has no unity. In this case, we're experiencing excessive variety. In fact, if we take shapes and place them over the space that the objects occupy in the picture plane, we can see how disjointed they are. We're missing unity almost completely. Now, let's arrange the objects in a third way. In this arrangement, we can clearly see variety. In fact, we have accentuated the variety that exists between the different objects, yet we've placed them in a way that creates some unity. If we take shapes and place them over the space that the objects occupy in the picture plane, we can clearly see this. Now we have variety within unity. And this is exactly what Plato was talking about when referring to composition. The next compositional theory is the golden mean. The golden mean can be a bit complex. The golden mean is basically a ratio that states that C, which is A plus B, is to A the same way that A is to B. Now, how would we use this ratio? Well, basically, this ratio is a way of planning out special points in your picture plane. These are called golden points because they're based on the golden mean. According to this theory, placing objects in the golden points will result in a more aesthetically pleasing composition. You may have two important lines that intersect in this point, or you may choose to put an important subject in one of the golden points. Let's take a look at an example. In this example, the artist has drawn a lighthouse. The artist has placed the lighthouse, in this case, directly in the center of the composition. The composition seems very boring and void. But if we take the same elements of this composition and move it to the area of the golden point, as stated before, we can see that the composition is improved. It's become more aesthetically pleasing, more interesting, and more dynamic than the composition was before. A theory that's related to the golden mean is the rule of thirds. And basically, with the rule of thirds, a picture plane is divided by thirds. This produces lines and points where you can place objects to produce more aesthetically pleasing compositions. Here's a look at the rule of thirds at work in a composition. In this case, the tree is placed on one of the lines that has been divided according to the rule of thirds. The horizon line also exists on one of those lines. Another compositional theory deals with eye movement. Eye movement refers to the way a viewer's eye might move through a piece of artwork. An artist has the ability to manipulate the way a viewer may move through a piece of artwork by placing certain objects within the picture plane. For example, if we look at this piece, in this composition, the artist has presented a very static composition. All of the objects are aligned vertically. If we were to take a line and draw it over the top of these objects, we would have an indication of what a viewer's eye might do in this composition. A viewer's eye might enter at the top of the picture plane and exit directly out the bottom. This produces a very static composition that's not very dynamic. However, if we arrange these objects differently on the picture plane, we can affect the viewer's eye movement in a different way. We can encourage the viewer to see the entire picture plane and move through the piece gracefully. If we were to take a line and draw it over the top of these objects, we can see that a viewer might be encouraged to enter the picture plane in the upper left-hand corner, move downward to the pyramid, and out the bottom via the cube. This is a more dynamic composition. We can take things one step further by adding variety to the objects that exist in the picture plane. We can still create that eye movement and create an overall aesthetically pleasing composition. Good compositions always have focal points. Focal points are the areas in our picture plane that we want the viewer to look at. They may be the subjects or areas of importance. We can create these focal points in a variety of methods. One method is through contrast. Contrast deals with difference. In this case, the red triangle becomes the focal point because of difference. It is different in color, it's different in shape as well. Because of this, it becomes the focal point. Another way to create focal points in drawings is through convergence. Convergence deals with implied lines. In this image by Mary Cassatt, convergence is used to make the envelope a focal point. The implied lines exist on the furniture, the letter on the table, the pattern in her clothing, her fingers, and her eyes that are looking downward. Another way to create a focal point is through isolation. By placing one item away from other items, it naturally becomes the focal point. In this example, the cone in the foreground is the focal point because it's separate from the other forms that are further away. Still, another way that you can create a focal point is by adding something that's unusual or something that's unexpected. In this case, our eyes are immediately drawn to the alien because it is unusual or unexpected for this image. This may be an extreme example, but something as simple as a change in pattern or texture could be considered unusual or unexpected. So what did we learn in this video? Well, first we learned in drawing, composition refers to the way the elements of an image are arranged within the picture plane. We also learned that composition refers not only to recognizable subjects, but also to the elements and principles of art, including line, space, value, color, shape, and form, as well as balance, proportion, movement, and contrast. We also learned a few compositional theories that can be used to help ensure successful compositions in your drawings. We learned that skillful use of positive and negative space can lead to successful composition. We also learned by adjusting the compositional elements in a drawing, we can create areas that are focal points in our drawings. This brings us to the end of this video. In the next video, we're going to look at specific drawing media, and we'll begin with the most basic drawing media there is, graphite.